Hello and welcome to episode 9 of Digital League of Assessment Professionals, a collective of assessors especially created to professionalize assessment within the digital space. This morning we are hosted by P4P. Passion for Performance continued to be the leading e-assessment platform in South Africa. In our experience, we've been exploring and searching for ways to create a space for assessment within the digital world, and hence the birth of DLab. My name is Gabriel. I'll be your host this morning. I'm a trainer within the pro audio space. Thank you for joining us on this extremely cold winter's morning. The topic this morning is how assessment impacts learning and RPL. And we're talking to Dr. Shirley Lloyd. Morning, Shirley. How's it going?
Very well, thank you. Good morning, Gabriel.
Great, thank you for joining us. I'm going to ask you just to give a 1 minute, just introducing yourself and maybe just a little bit of your background.
Okay, thank you. Well, I've recently retired from formal work, but in terms of the topic today, I've been an educationist in my entire working career in different forms, and certainly been involved in recognition of prior learning and various aspects of it for many years. And so I currently serve on a number of committees, some professional body boards, etc. So I'm still very active in the education and training space, but RPL is definitely one of the areas in which I have studied a lot, and my doctorate was actually, my thesis title was Recognition of Prior Learning, a Social Entrepreneurial Practice. So it remains a passion.
Sure.
Thank you.
So we've got no one better to talk to about this topic than you. Great, thank you very much. We're going to dive straight into the question. So the first question is then, what is RPL? What is recognition of prior learning?
It's an interesting question, Gabriel, because when we started with RPL years ago, it had a particular meaning and definition, which was quite a restrictive definition, I suppose, in one sense. But as the world has moved and as practices have moved, the definition has changed. So I'm going to try and give you an idea about RPL, which covers all of that. Because RPL still remains the recognition of forms of learning. Now, in Europe, they call it formal, non-formal, informal learning. South Africa, we still talk about recognition of prior learning, but it's a recognition of learning in a formal space, but which was not assessed, or in a non-formal, or in an informal space, work experience, practice experience, all of those things. And it's recognizing that learning, knowledge, skill, competence, and experience against a formal set of assessment criteria, and very much, in my opinion, embedded within, in our South African context, the learning outcomes, exit level outcomes of a registered qualification or part qualification. So you're taking all of this informal learning and knowledge gained in other contexts other than a formal classroom with formal assessment, and you're bringing it back to that space to do some form of assessment, to give some form of recognition or credit for it.
Sure, that is a beautiful description.
That's how, so it really covers a wide spectrum of what we do in RPL and what it is.
So in your experience, what are the different forms of RPL that you've come across? If you can maybe just give us a little bit of a breakdown on that.
Okay. When we started with RPL initially, a lot of the focus on RPL was RPL for access, for people who really wanted to access a qualification or to be able to study further. People might not have had the opportunities to do so. And we know in our own past in South Africa, this is a significant issue and a rather significant imperative for us to be able to recognize people's knowledge and skills for them to be able to access formal qualifications where they were previously excluded based on race and other reasons. So when we started with RPL, it was RPL for access into a qualification, further learning, or access into a degree to study at a university. But over a period of time, that loosened up a little bit. And RPL for some credit was also then became quite important. So how do you give somebody credit for learning that they have so that they don't have to repeat the learning should they move from one institution to another? And that's credit accumulation and credit transfer. And the two go, RPL and credit accumulation and transfer are very closely linked in that context as well. But RPL has also recently been moving and being applied to recognition of prior learning for designations. So people might have worked in a professional context, and now a formal designation system is put in place, and they can be RPL for that. Quite a new move, and I've worked quite a bit in this space and found very, very interesting issues emerging, is recognition of prior learning for people who want promotion in the workplace, but do not have the qualification that is written down in the job advert or in the job spec that the company or the department or the organization has. So we are seeing RPL being applied in different contexts, and not only for access. There are rare occasions, but they have happened both here and internationally, where people are actually RPL'd for a whole qualification. And again, the principles of RPL and assessment and all of that apply, but it also extends there. So RPL is not anymore just, oh, I need to access, I've done all of this work, I go to a university or a college and I present them with evidence and they allow me in to study without necessarily having the linear qualification requirements. I don't know if that's
sure. Yeah,
helps.
That's a very good description. I've actually just been through this whole process because I got a designation in professional audio, which is interesting because our industry has been very unregulated up to now, and now we're stepping into it. So I relate to what you're saying. We're also having those challenges concerning what it is that needs to be considered in this specific designations. There's been lots of fights actually between the different areas, because a lot of the people that are in the live industry will feel it's too heavily focused on theater, and then the guys who are in visuals, they feel it's too much of this. But we're working it out, and it's definitely something that needs to happen. Exciting to go there. How does assessment differ between the different RPL forms?
A very interesting question, and I'm going to take a few minutes here because I think it's important that people understand and start moving in their paradigms to be able to embrace RPL as something that has credibility and that is an honest way of achieving recognition. So, for example, if you're looking at RPL for access into a qualification, I've done some work there, and I know numerous other people have, but I'll speak from my own experience. I was involved in a project a couple of years ago where there were two groups from two different companies, and they had different backgrounds, different qualification levels, different approaches, different understandings, learnings, experience, etc. But they all needed to enter a national qualifications framework level 7 qualification, which is either a first degree, a 360 credit first degree, or an advanced diploma. At that time, that was the qualification. What we did was we looked at the first step was to look at what are the indicators for somebody who would be entering studies at that level. What would they need to be able to display, do, know, experience, present, write, all of those good things. So we went to the level descriptor. The South African Qualifications Authority is required through the NQF Act to publish these policies after consultation. And so the level descriptor policy is a key instrument in looking at the level, the descriptor there, And we presented that to all of these people, and we asked them to do certain things. And they had to write 4 papers. A small paper at first, then a larger one, and finally a combined effort paper to show and demonstrate that they could actually function and learn at that level. It was hugely successful. I think we had one of the candidates who didn't complete for personal reasons, but all the candidates who accessed that qualification and entered the institution, in fact, did as well as, if not better than, all the other learners in that same group.
Sure.
And using the level descriptor, and also using the learning outcomes, which are stipulated and stated in the registered qualification, guided what sort of profile, what evidence, what information and knowledge, etc., will you need to display. So they all were able to access the qualification. We tracked them, and they all passed. I think one left for personal reasons. So that is RPL for accessing that context. And I think there are many, many, many examples. But I like to use the registered qualification, the learning outcomes, the level descriptors, and a very important aspect right up front is what I call it, we are co-journeying. We are partners on the journey, the RPL provider or student support person and the candidate. We are co-journeying, and we talk about it. We have a look at what the learning outcomes are, what will be expected, what sort of evidence, etc. So it's very important to embed your practice in a sound, solid, empirical theory and evidence, as well as in those policies. So that would be RPL for access. The assessment there is against the level descriptor, what would be required of them, and what would be the entrance requirement of the institution. It's almost like those tests that matriculants write before they enter a university.
Sure.
In RPL for credit, again, they're wanting credit towards the achievement of, let's say, a qualification. Again, you've got your registered qualification with its learning outcomes and its exit level outcomes. Some of the quals would go as far as having specific outcomes and associated assessment criteria. So you take the learner with you on that journey into that qualification. And I always find it very interesting that very few people actually realize how much is contained within a registered qualification, how much information.
Yeah.
So the candidate will sit with you, and we will go through what is there, what sort of evidence, and what are the exit level outcomes, learning outcomes that would be assessed in a formal classroom situation. And therefore, the assessment is built around exactly the same learning outcomes, exactly the same standard, which is determined by your level descriptors again. And it's not different. It's not a quick fix. It's not something that you can just say, oh, well, I've done that. You have to provide the evidence against a formal set of criteria, learning outcomes, etc. Again, the importance of the journey, the co-journey, the partner journey. We are walking that road together, the student, the candidate, the group, and the RPL person. And so that form of assessment for credit is slightly different, because the institution, the accredited institution, will need to say, okay, we are satisfied that you have presented enough evidence, shown your knowledge, skill, competence, experience, which would meet what we would have assessed in a formal question paper. And we are therefore granting you credit, and you do not have to redo that stuff. So that would be RPL for credit. When you come to RPL for a designation, I also use the same building blocks. We will sit with the student. In this case, though, remember, in a designation, you are not awarding a qualification. Only an accredited education and training provider that is accredited by one of the three quality councils is able to award formal credit towards a qualification. In a designation, though, the professional body plays the role, because only a professional body can award a designation. So you would look at that designation. You would look at the criteria set out by the professional body to achieve that designation. And the candidate would again go through a similar process of saying, yes, I've done all of this, but no, I haven't done that. There could be some gaps. So you would then design a further learning program, CPD program, whatever. But again, using level descriptors. And again, I like to have a look at a qualification that would be a concomitant qualification or a professional in that space, and show the whole picture to the candidate applying for the designation. Remembering it is not awarding a qualification. But other than that, you're also assessing, they're providing evidence of professional practice, professional experience. You are looking at it against the criteria, and should they satisfy all of those, they would be awarded the designation by the professional body. In an RPL for promotion case, and I've worked in that space now for a while and find it very, very interesting. Usually when a job advert goes out, you will find that the organization will have an idea of the qualification type and level, which that job would need to, a person in that job would need to have. So in the RPL for promotion, again, remembering the co-journey, the person with you, you would show them the different kinds of qualifications that could be like a marketing degree. Very interestingly, often a job description, a job advert is put out. But when you look at all the different marketing degrees registered on the NQF, you'll find that only one or two or three actually, the learning outcomes actually speak to that job description. So you need to take time with a candidate and with the organization. And this is where I've been involved each time with the HR department. It's good to have them there, and the candidate supervisor sometimes comes into those discussions and says, okay, this qualification or those two or three, those learning outcomes would be the most appropriate for our particular job. Again, the same thing, the guidance, the design of the assessment tool. Then the candidate would put together evidence against all of the areas in the job description, but also evidence against the learning outcomes of the qualification. So it's quite a matrix. And because it's so important, it's an RPL for promotion, it requires both of those issues to be in the evidence portfolio. What I've done is, once I've looked at all of that together with a supervisor or HR person, we then call the candidate into what I call an oral interview. And all the candidates so far have been very pleased to have that. Because there we delve deeper into the learning outcome, and we delve deeply into the critical cross-field outcome context, where we can ask other questions other than what are just in the learning outcomes. And in each case, I have been so pleasantly surprised to see the depth of knowledge, skill and experience that the candidate has that is far bigger than the job description actually requires. And so you're not awarding a qualification. You're not giving them the job. In your report, you're saying you have done, you carefully transcribe what you've done, and you say, I believe this person has the comparable knowledge, skill and experience to be able to be shortlisted. And should they then be the successful candidate, I believe that they would make a difference in the job. So there are different purposes, but and different ways. But each time I have used the qualification, the level descriptor, the student support. The design has also been slightly different. Sometimes people will do a video presentation. We've had that in the sports fraternity where coaches have presented what they've done, and there's been on-site verification where you go to the field and have a look. But each time the basic underpinning principles I've used the NQF for that. I found it to be a very solid base. I hope that helps explain the difference in assessment, but you're still coming back to a formal form of learning outcomes criteria. So whether you're in a formal classroom or whether you're a candidate, you have to demonstrate the same levels of knowledge, skill, experience, but your evidence production is different.
I've actually got a question that you touched on, but I wonder if you should, I know we are pushing time, but if you shouldn't elaborate on that a little bit. Have you found that if there's a job position available within an organization and the skills was acquired within that job, have you found that it's beneficial to acquire that specific job position, or that whoever was the HR department that was doing the assessment was going like, we still would have rather want them to do some formal learning, or we found that they've got the skills, but maybe in addition to that, because obviously those skills were acquired within the context of that business, right?
Context, yes. Yes, I have found that on 2 or 3 occasions in a more formal government environment. As I say, a lot of people they distrust, can you see me?
Yeah, sorry.
There you are. A lot of people distrust RPL. They don't understand it. And in the HR departments, they sort of think, is this a quick fix? And we don't want to be accused by the unions of being unfair, etc., etc. That is why it's always good to have your HR person there. And I always ask the candidate, would they like any other people there in the initial discussions? Sometimes we have had a union person there as well when we're going through what it is. So I always explain RPL, show them the whole context, show them the RPL, the qualification, all of that. What we have found, I've had 3 candidates like that who were acting in the position. And now the position has to be publicized and people apply. But this person has been there for acting, so they also require an opportunity. And the unions are usually very supportive of that as long as there's credibility, validity, and relevance in what we are doing. And as you show the HR people, they get won over. And in fact, once or twice, the HR department and the head of HR has become very excited about this journey because they see that this person that has been acting or this person that has been working there with them has actually gained this incredible knowledge, skill, experience base. And they feel very much part of that because they've enabled this person to grow a set of skills.
Yeah.
And so when you start actually formally presenting that and the evidence comes through and you start assessing that, and in the oral interview especially, you win them over. So yes, it's the journey, but the more you involve people to enable them to understand and take them with you, I have found that they actually become quite excited about it and they feel they can actually then stand in for it. So an HR director or manager will be able to say, I have seen the integrity of this assessment. It would be no different to somebody writing a 3-hour exam in a university. This person has actually been through far more interrogation, depth of evidence presented, etc.
Yeah. And what they've learned is held up. Yeah, what they've learned is held up within that organization. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been able to apply for that position in the first place, right?
Yes, absolutely.
This kind of leads us into our next question. Is assessment of RPL different to assessment of full learning qualifications?
I would like to say, and in my experience, I don't think so. I think when you're using the tools and mechanisms that I like to use, because I am very focused on the importance of the credibility of the process and the credibility of the evidence. So what I usually would do is take the learning, if it's for a qualification or a part qualification, or even for a designation, what are those criteria? What are those learning outcomes? And what would reasonably be asked in an assessment in a formal classroom exam situation? And that becomes very much the tool that the RPL candidate would be assessed against as well. The difference being that the RPL candidate would need to provide all forms of evidence. And there you become very creative and innovative. And it's actually wonderful to see all of this stuff coming through that the candidates have. And sometimes I have been brought to tears by the wealth of knowledge and experience, and also the anxiety of the candidate to show, hey, I really know this stuff and I can do it. It's a very personal journey for that candidate, but for the person with them walking it, it also becomes a very personal journey. So the assessment tool has to withstand scrutiny. It needs to be credible. It needs to be very, very similar to what they would be asked to demonstrate in a written exam. We are finding now that in the moving into newer space, the online situation. I'm just wanting to see here. Can you see me?
There we go. You're back.
There we go. I disappeared. We're finding that the online space now, of especially COVID-19, has raised this as a hugely important issue.
Yeah.
And I have found across the system that many providers who thought they're very good online providers, in fact, are not. Because the system, the technology, the system to support online learning and online assessment did not really exist.
Yeah.
And so now we're needing to find systems and build systems where the credibility is there, the honesty is there, and where the evidence can be uploaded against learning outcomes, or in the case of a designation, against the criteria in a certain way, and that the assessor and moderator of that system is able to engage at all stages with the learning that has happened, with the evidence that is being presented. So we have found a lot of providers have said, well, we can do online, but we don't know how to assess online.
Yeah.
And so to build assessment online to retain credibility, again, we go level descriptor for the standard, we go the learning outcomes, we go the designation criteria. All of those are put in there. And the candidate would need to provide evidence this time, put into some kind of a Dropbox or whatever. And the assessor engages. And then when you do the gap analysis, etc., you would be able to have it in online form rather than the real-time form that you have.
Yeah.
The beauty of online as well is we can do what we're doing now. An oral interview can be Zoom.
Yeah.
Also, if you have to take somebody on site, you can do it via Zoom, Skype. You can do it so you can demonstrate and show in the workplace.
Yeah.
And I think that is important, but online needs to be as credible as a face-to-face as well.
I think we're going to see it more. I think everyone's kind of leaning, even the manufacturers that I've been speaking to in my field, they're leaning towards that because we've taken the trainer out in the personal interaction. And now we can, so we load the videos and they're watching the videos and we can go like, oh, we've got some analytics as to how much information was received, but now we need to test it. That's actually exactly what we're working on now with Harmon, is how to make this connection between the hardware and the testing. And break it up in much smaller little segments seems to be the way we're going to go. We've got 6 minutes left.
Okay.
I've got a Facebook question that I would like to ask. RPL seems to be be based on good assessment strategy. How important is the assessment strategy in that context?
I think, when you're designing the whole RPL process, assessment is a key part of RPL. And in fact, RPL, without having the assessment component, you're really not having, your RPL is linked into assessment. You're assessing, you're examining, exploring for the purpose of some kind of achievement, a person's knowledge, skill, experience. So assessment is central to recognition of prior learning. How the assessment is designed, what underpins what is in the assessment, is where I use, as I say, either the learning outcomes, critical cross-field outcomes, level descriptors, specific issues in the designation, etc. But it has to be assessed. and then based on the assessment awarded. If there is a gap, often in the professional space, you will fill that gap through CPD or lifelong learning interventions. Or if it's in a formal qualification, they can get some credit, but be directed to the provider to complete that qualification.
So there's a
but
question.
Assessment obviously is there.
Yeah. So there's a question that follows onto that, part 2, that I haven't read, is should the RPL candidate have access to the full assessment strategy?
Yes, they're a partner in it. Gone are the days where the teacher or the educator is the holder and controller of knowledge. We live in a world of knowledge, a knowledge-rich, technology-rich world. So when you're teaching and learning in a formal classroom, the children know what is the curriculum, they know what they have to do. We've seen this now with the schools, where every child and parent has had the homework, has had everything there, and they've had to do that thing. They've had to manage that curriculum and the delivery of it to the child. The RPL candidate should always be a partner in this issue and in the design. The only thing is that you don't let drop the standard, the level, what is going to be assessed, because there it is in black and white in the qualification, learning outcome, or whatever. But they are a partner.
Yeah.
And they can often say, well, I would like to also do a video, may I? I would like that, may I? And they co-design with you their own journey. And that is where their self-knowledge comes, where they realize where they might have a gap or not.
I've got one other question. I think this one's from Darren. We've got 3 minutes left. He's asking if we capture content or a video via Zoom, can we use this as evidence as well?
Globally, they are using that as evidence.
Yeah.
If a person takes you to their workplace and they show you how they do 3D printing and how they design the model, put it in the 3D printer, and out it comes, and they use it in a process, and it's the actual person being videoed, how much more authentic could you wish for? It's the authenticity of the process, and you are watching that live. So definitely in most parts of the world. In South Africa, we're slowly starting to acknowledge and recognize that as evidence as well, not only written evidence. And I think as we open up to new understandings of RPL, those are very important aspects of demonstration of evidence.
I think we're going to definitely see more of that being, building. I think it's going to become a mindset. And actually, the irony is that when it comes to stuff like homeschooling, for instance, they've been doing it for years. You would collect what needs to become part of that portfolio over the years, and then at some stage you will need to present it for that child to go into a university or a college. So it's kind of just I think for some reason there's a mindset that needs to change when it comes to to organizations, but it's going to happen, right?
It's going to happen, and
it's happening.
It's happening, and there are 2 people, I think, 3 people, in fact, that I just quickly want to mention that are good thought leaders in the space. One of them is Dr. James Kiwi, current CEO of JET.
We've got a few seconds left.
Professor Shirley Lloyd, who talks about the binary worlds and how we need to cross these, and Mr. Joe Samuels, who is a great thought leader in terms of learning outcomes, how learning happens, all of those things. So yes, there are people out there.
Thank you very much for your time, Shirley. Appreciate it. Very insightful and thorough. And I wish we had a few more minutes to talk to you, but we're going to have to run. Keep well. Have a lovely day. Cheers.
You too. Have a wonderful day. Keep well. Look after yourselves. Keep warm.
Yes.
Bye.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye.